Hey everybody, Peter Zahan here coming to you from Colorado. Today we're going to talk about Venezuela because for those of you who have been under a rock for the last few days, the United States military launched a special forces strike into Caracas, captured President Nicolás Maduro, and brought him back to New York to face charges for drug trafficking, terrorism, and conspiracy. He's been under indictment since 2220, and he's obviously not going home anytime soon. So the question everyone's asking is pretty simple. Why now? Why did the United States decide this was the moment? The answer has less to do with Trump's inconsistent rhetoric and everything to do with something much older and more structural. We're witnessing the revival of the Monroe Doctrine. Let me give you the big picture. The Monroe Doctrine dates back to the 1820s, when the United States declared the Western Hemisphere its exclusive sphere of influence. European powers were simply not welcome. Back then, America couldn't really enforce it, but by Teddy Roosevelt's era, the U.S. was actively intervening throughout Latin America to keep outsiders away. Then World War II came and Monroe was quietly shelved, not because Washington stopped believing in it, but because the entire world suddenly became America's sphere. The Cold War ended 35 years ago, though, and the U.S. never had a real conversation about what comes next. Now the system is falling apart. The United States is pulling back from Europe, from Asia, from global commitments broadly, and when America comes home, it doesn't just sit quietly, it starts looking around at who's been causing trouble in the neighborhood while it was away. If China and Russia are no longer top priorities, then Latin America rises up the list automatically. Venezuela, with its Russian and Chinese connections and complete institutional collapse, was always going to be near the top. Now for the smaller picture. Venezuela used to be a fairly successful country. It nationalized oil in the 1970s, but partnered with Western multinationals to develop its heavy crude. By the mid-1990s, it was producing over 3 million barrels per day. Good infrastructure, solid education, food security, real partnerships. Then Hugo Chavez came to power in 1999 and began a 25-year process of driving the country into the ground, using natural riches to fuel his personal cult and ideological project. When Chavez died in 2013, his successor was Nicolás Maduro, literally his former bus driver. Chavez chose people not for competence but for loyalty and ability to keep the population controlled while he looted everything. Maduro learned at Chavez's feet and doubled down on both oppression and theft. Oil production collapsed to less than a fifth of its peak. The infrastructure rusted away. The educational system hollowed out. A few years ago, famine hit so hard, the average Venezuelan lost over 20 pounds in a single year. They've bounced back slightly, but only because Chevron still operates there, generating enough capital to import food. Venezuela now imports roughly 80% of what it eats. It used to be a food exporter. Between a quarter and a third of the population has fled entirely. And Maduro, because he thinks like a bus driver, never built any succession plan. There's no one capable of taking over. Here's where we are now. The U.S. grabbed Maduro but hasn't put any real boots on the ground. Trump says America is in charge of Venezuelan security. But there's no occupation force. Venezuela has over 20 million people, imports most of its food, and faces crushing sanctions. Cargo ships aren't coming. Famine conditions should restart within weeks, maybe a month at most. The opposition exists, but they're like the Democrats, unable to agree on anything. One option is the U.S. sends 100,000 troops for a 20-year nation-building project costing at least $200 billion. But there's a geographical nightmare. Coastal mountains separate Caracas from the sea with long tunnels perfect for guerrilla resistance. Occupying Venezuela would be harder than Iraq. Washington has no appetite for that. So, most likely we're watching the beginning of a long descending spiral. Chaos, starvation, civil conflict, mass outmigration. I would love to be wrong on this one, but Venezuela has been declining since Chavez took power in 1999. What's happening now isn't the end of that decline, it's the acceleration. Here's what to watch over 3 months. Does the U.S. send meaningful military forces or walk away after the snatch and grab? Can anyone inside Venezuela actually form a functioning government? How fast do food supplies run out? And do Russia or China attempt anything or simply write off their investments as lost? My bet is they walk away, but stranger things have happened. Monroe is back. Venezuela was first. The real question is who's next?